Hi, Mr. C here. The next step that we were talking about in building cabinet doors for your upper cabinet, we have these flat panel doors. Well, the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and sand the rails and stiles and the edge grain on these and the inside of the edges to make sure that when we glue this together, we don't have a problem trying to sand the insides of the parts. So I find it's a lot easier to sand a majority of the material or some material surfaces or take care of the mill marks on these before you glue it in one structure. So I'd like to talk to you about some of the tools that we have out today and the different processes of what is the proper way of going ahead and building a door. Okay. Now we've already spent some time cutting all the parts out. As you've seen, we've milled out all the different joints. We have all the different pieces here. Like as you can see here, I have my panel, I have my rails, and I have my stiles to my door. So what I've done is I've taken the liberty of taking my pencil and marking across the whole surface of the face here, the edge here, and the edge here. Now, how we're going to address or sand off or remove the milling marks on edges is different than on the faces. I've seen many people do some things that can kind of distort or change the way the door goes together. And it wasn't intended for this to happen, but unfortunately some people or students or people try to cut corners, and it can be a real big problem as far as when they go ahead and put the door together. Now, the biggest one is this, is I've seen in years past, is I'll see a student or an adult, that's in my adult community ed class, they'll take all their rails and stiles, they'll put them together like this, and then they'll put them in a vise. Well, the only thing is you can't guarantee these are all the same plane. So one part might slip a little bit higher than the other. Now this is a dramatic way of showing it, but what will happen is if one slips just slightly down and you sand all that, now you've tapered the one piece. Now there's no way that this can be square. So I found another way that I can show you how to go ahead and take care of this surface, this edge surface, and this edge surface that's relatively fast. Now the whole purpose in us sanding the surface is to remove any discontinuity that may have been like a little bit of discoloring from the table saw blade where I get a little bit too hot on the end grain here, or the edge grain. Especially because this is quarter sawn at that point, so it burnt really easy on that particular part of it. So what it can do is, we want to remove the milling marks or any type of burn mark, but yet, like I said, these have been milled to exact size, so you don't want to take off very much material. So, especially on the edges, okay? Because the edges is how all these parts come together exactly, okay? And if you change this too much, you change the material here too much, you're going to end up with a gap where the tenon comes in. You want to avoid that. So one way to do that is this, is I have, let's say, this is the side that has the groove for the panel to go into and the tenon to go into from the rail and stile. So what I can do is I can just put this in a vise, okay? Now I have two different spring steel scrapers here. Some of you have never seen these before, some of you have. These are great tools because what they can do is they can remove the milling marks really fast with very little effort. And in that way you can just go behind it and sand it with 220 or 180 then 220, and you're going to end up with a finished surface. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you how to properly go ahead and put an edge on the scrapers. I'm just going to take the smaller scraper here. Now this one was bought at a local woodwork supply company. Now because we have a lab next door that's metal, I just used the shears and I bought some springs. I bought a large piece of spring steel and I just went ahead and cut a whole bunch of these cards out of spring steel because it works the same. And actually I'll just show you this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the vise and I'm just going to go ahead, put this in here nice and tight. Now I need two tools. One is a mill file and one is a burnishing tool, just to harden steel, okay? You don't have to go out and buy one of these. It's not necessary. As long as you have a piece of hardened steel, you can use that for burnishing the edge. Whoa, sorry. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a flat surface with the mill file. And you want to be careful that you do not slip off and cut yourself. I'm just going to file this, and I want to try and keep this as flat as I possibly can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the burr over on both sides. Now I just take my hardened steel, and I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure, not very much. And all I want to do is just flatten out that steel, and I'm going to roll it over so it creates a burr on both sides. And then I can tilt it just 1 or 2 degrees to the left, 1 or 2 degrees to the right. And that's all I need to do. And what that'll do is it creates a little burr that's folded over, and that becomes my cutting edge. So as you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and grab the camera, and I'm going to show you the pencil lines. See how there's a pencil line on here all the way down. Now this is going to be removed really quickly. Okay, so I'll show you exactly how I have to go ahead and do this. So let me just go ahead and point this down. Sorry about that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my tool steel, and I'm going to take my thumbs, push them out, so I flex this just a little bit. 2 scrapes this way. I'm just going to take this, rotate this way. One, 2. It removed all the pencil lines, but when it removed the pencil lines, it also removed all those milling marks that were left by the last machine. Then all I have to do is just grab my handy dandy sanding block, hardly any technology here, right? And I have a finished sandpaper of 180 on here. Now all I want to do is just sand this a little bit. Now, this side, or this edge, or this surface here is completely done. I just flip this over. I grab my scraper again. And you can see this burr mark here. Done there. Flip it around. There. I go ahead. Well, some of you will say, hey, Mr. C, why do you hold this on an angle like this? Well, what I'm doing is I'm holding this, but I'm also holding the part like this, so that way I don't slip one way or the other, because if I tilt this one way or the other, I'm going to taper the edge of the piece where it's not going to be 90 degrees any longer. So I make sure that I hold on to this that way. I'll use this part up, and I'll turn it the other way and go across this way. I'll use up the sandpaper all the way across. Okay? Now, this is how I go ahead and sand the edges of the part. Okay? So now I'm going to put you back over here, and I'm going to explain to you how I'm going to go ahead and address the faces of the parts. Okay. All right. So now I have my pieces here. I'm just gonna set these off to the side with the other door parts, okay? Now my spring steel scraper. I hope that you guys learned something with that. I'm gonna go ahead and take off my glasses, put my safety glasses on. Now what I'm gonna do is this. And then this is the panel to one door. I have my router mat, but I also like to use it for sanding purposes. So you can set this down on here and it's not gonna move around, okay? I'm just gonna set these on top so it doesn't roll over. Okay? Now I have in front of me, and I took the liberty of marking these. This is 80 on it. This is 80 grit sandpaper. I have 100 grit sandpaper. I have 120 grit sandpaper. I have 150. And then I have 180. Now these are the 5 different sandpapers that I'm going to use on all of these different rails and styles. I do not sand the panel. This is a veneered plywood panel. The veneer is only 1/32 of an inch thick, so I do not want to use a random orbit sander on this because I'll sand right through it and burn right through the veneer, and then I have a ruined, destroyed panel and I have to make a new one. This surface right here, I will only sand this by hand with 220 grit, and that's it.